One of the things I want to talk about today, I want to share a little bit about is sales, and done a lot of sales over the years, and we've got some sales people in here, so you guys may know. Hopefully this won't be all redundant and put you to sleep. Hopefully there'll be some things here that are helpful. I was a commission salesman for a number of years before I started my first business, and been able to have a lot of success over the years in sales, and even having had my own business, had a lot of success in sales because those things carried over, and amazingly, just about everything we do has some form of sales in it. Whether we like it or not, we're presenting ourselves, presenting what we do, presenting, our entities or businesses or whatever. So sales is really all about what you say and how you say it. It's really an art. Sadly, having been in sales, when I meet a lot of salespeople, I find that a lot of times they make mistakes and they're not really trained that well in certain things, because a lot of times sales positions are kind of an entry-level position. Like when I got out of college years ago, everybody went into sales, usually in business, because that was kind of the entry level. That's where everybody started. And so that kind of became the way that you got into the business, and then from there, hopefully, we're good enough that you could work your way up into something else. And, back in the 90s when I actually did work in corporate, sadly, salespeople were kind of looked down on as a profession by managers and people farther up the food chain in the corporate structure. And, you'd meet people and they, what do you do? Oh, I'm in sales. And they kind of look at you like you're, a slickster or some kind of a guy that's going to, not really somebody of integrity, not really somebody that's honest, or somebody that is even having a successful career, which is kind of funny when you look at it, because commission salespeople are some of the highest paid people as a profession. So let's talk about some sales do's and don'ts from my experience. I've trained sales teams and salespeople for years. One of the things from a Christian standpoint or a spiritual standpoint is, before I even go into sales situations, I would pray first and ask God for wisdom and guidance for the meeting and the conversation from the Holy Spirit. Every sales meeting is going to be different. Every person you're meeting is going to be different, going to have different situations. Everyone, you can't just do a cookie cutter approach. You're going to need sometimes some wisdom to deal with that particular person and their objections and things. So one of the things I also would do is believe God for favor that would overcome anything negative, even minor mistakes that you might make in your sales process. Sometimes you don't know that person or what's going on in their life, so sometimes as you're unfolding things, you might potentially run into something that, either you don't know how to handle, or sometimes you might almost say something that you didn't realize was a sensitive element for that person. So I would always believe God for favor to overcome all those things. And we talked about favor last time. And even to help them or go through the process of favor for the conversion of them from a lead to a satisfied customer. Because you got the process of going from a lead to making them a customer, and then you got the process of going from a lead to a customer, and then to making that customer a happy customer or a satisfied customer. So these are some traits I learned over the years, traits of an ideal salesman. And some of these kind of go counter against some of the things that you maybe have heard in the media, or even certainly on television or movies or things like that. But they're people that are really what I would call an unafraid person with a calm quiet, or air of calm around them. Somebody that's not, yes, you need to have energy and enthusiasm, but people that are really kind of settled and not easily rattled by things. One of the things you need to do when you're meeting with a customer is you got to make them feel comfortable with you, and you got to be able to build rapport. And sometimes people that are, I just put it this way, kind of the wrong nature, they can upset that, and they don't really help get that person calm because they don't have that air of calm around them. Does that make sense? Second is someone that has great presence but is someone that's modest. I personally have always had an issue with people, and I've run into lots of them over the years, professional salespeople that oversell and underdeliver. And if you want to be successful, you want to build a successful business, you undersell and overdeliver. That's the best way to make happy customers, is you exceed expectations. If you set their expectations this high in the sales process and you deliver down here, you're going to burn through customers very fast. You're not going to have a really good series of repeat business out of that, and you're constantly going to be out there fishing for new customers because you're burning bridges about as fast as you can get them to sign a contract. The third one is the people that let actions do the talking. Not just people that talk, but they walk it out too. And they let their actions speak as loud or louder than what they say. Fourth, they're willing to be judged by results, which kind of ties in with the third one. And number 5 is the ego does not need to be the center stage. People with too much ego are really not good salespeople because they don't care about the customer. They're not really able to empathize with that customer, not really able to connect with them on the level they need to. And over the years, most of my customers were not only my customers, but they later became my friends in the process. And if you got too much ego in the process, that's going to get in the way of creating those kinds of relationships. So let's talk about some sales killers, because actually there are certain things that can work in a counterproductive measure when we're meeting with someone from a sales standpoint. First is lack of professional appearance. They don't care how they look. You see someone that comes in sloppy dressed and they don't look professional and they don't act professional, then if they don't care any more about that, then it makes me think they're not going to really care about my order or my business that well either. I mean, if they take a sloppy approach to all these things that I'm seeing visually, then that probably is going to carry through to the way they conduct business too. Second is talking too much. When you're talking, you're telling. You can't sell well if you're the one that's doing all the talking. Yes, you have a certain point where you have to give your presentation, you do your dog and pony show for them or whatever, presentation you've got, and that's great, but at some point in time, you have to shift and you start to have to ask questions. You have to let them do the talking. Because if you're asking questions, that's really how you control conversation. So there's a point where we have to stop talking and ask questions and turn the conversation back around to getting information and being able to lead them through the process of however your closing process is set up in your sales process. Number 3, your vocabulary. Words create pictures in our minds, both good and bad. And there are lots of words that salespeople use that are absolutely creating fear in their customers' minds immediately by the things they say. We'll get into that here in a moment a little bit deeper. Fourth is not investing time in building rapport. They have to like you and trust you. You got to look initially in a sales meeting for ways to build rapport and build it quickly. And if you try and move too fast through that process, you haven't established rapport. When you start to close, they're going to start to get real uncomfortable with you. So there's a process where you start to, and we're not going to get into that today, but start to use some test close questions and different things where you can kind of start to sense their openness or resistance to how much rapport you have in the closing process. And if they start to have some resistance to the test close, then that means your rapport isn't there, established like it needs to be. So we've got to kind of go back and rebuild on some of that. Number 5, I would say, is lack of a qualification system. Sometimes salespeople go out and they just kind of verbally throw up to everybody, and they haven't qualified those people to know, 1, if that person's even interested, and 2, even if that person's interested, are they qualified? Are they able? Do they have capacity? Or is this just something that's maybe a dream for 10 or 20 years in the future? You can waste a lot of time in sales presenting to the wrong people. And that's one of the things that really makes a difference between successful salespeople and non-successful people is the qualification process. Number 6 is not knowing when to stop presenting and close the sale. That kind of goes back to talking too long. Years ago, when I actually first started in sales, this was almost 30 years ago, one of the things one of the guys was telling me is, he said, he's kind of a seasoned guy in sales when I first started out on the road, and he said, if you're not picking up checks, you're just a PR guy. And I always remembered that. It's true. I mean, if you're not closing the deal, you're just a public relations person. because ultimately you got to close the business and you got to bring in a check if you want to be successful in sales. Next one would be ego. Again, we talked about selling is a service business. It's not what you're going to get. Especially people, and I've seen even guys on commission struggle with this. We had commission salespeople. We were on full commission, 100% commission. And I've seen salespeople even struggle with that. Maybe you go through kind of a slump, you got a couple of slow months or whatever, and you start to get start to look at your bills and start to get a little bit nervous about, okay, I got to get a check. And customers can start to feel that uneasiness. That's why we were talking earlier, why I mentioned about an air of calm when you're meeting with someone. Because if you're thinking in that sales process about what you're going to get, okay, I got this check, I got these bills, then you've immediately stepped out of service mode at that point. And so that's an important element to always remember, is selling is a service business. Whatever we're doing is a service business in selling. Not knowing how to close. And some people wrestle with that, especially when they're not seasoned in sales. They get a little uncomfortable about asking for your business. But ultimately, that's closing. You got to be able to ask for the business. And the next one will be not paying attention to details. A lot of times sales don't. I've seen this happen time and time again with salespeople in different entities where they get the contract, they get everything signed, get whatever deposit they need, and then there's several details that were discussed in that sales process that never got communicated through to the people on the fulfillment side of the business. So when you get to the fulfillment side of the business, you have a train wreck, because when that person goes out, let's just say you have a construction business and you have a sales or an estimator, whatever you call it, that sells the contract, and then you put it in the fulfillment side, it goes to their project manager or the people that are running the jobs, and that's not communicated well to that person. You're going to have a train wreck with that customer, because the customer is going to be mad that you said you were going to do this, well, you said you were going to do this, well, you said you're going to do that, and none of it got done. None of it got communicated well. So attention to details is huge. And the last one, again, is kind of ties in with that, is poor fulfillment. And the fulfillment of whatever you agree to do contractually. So let's kind of push past that. Selling is really an emotionally based, it's emotionally charged. It's an art of words and phraseology. Some of the guys, and probably Tom Hopkins is probably the master sales trainer that I've ever heard. And I don't even think he does. I went to one of his 3 days years ago. I don't think he even does 3 days anymore, because he's pretty well retired. He might do a couple of 2 days. But I mean, I think now his 2 days are like $11,000 for a 2-day training. But that guy will cover stuff that I've never heard anybody in sales training ever train on. But I'm going to share some of the things I learned from him over the years. Let's look at a quick example. And we're talking about, again, the art of words and phraseology. So let's just say hypothetically that David and I meet and we're at a social function, maybe we're at a barbecue or whatever, and he says, "Hey, what do you do?" And I say, "I sell insurance. I hope we can talk." You're probably going to scare that person away, and you're probably not going to get a good opportunity to talk with that person at that point, because people don't want to be sold anything. And even though Greg is very successful in that industry, when you put that out right at the beginning and that's your label, then that can scare people off, because nobody wants to be sold insurance. So let's look at it. Maybe there's another way to phrase that. So let's look at it from this way. Instead of saying, "I sell insurance, I hope we can talk," maybe what if we said it this way? "Well, I help people, both families and businesses, build financial security and get out of debt sooner than they would ordinarily do." And they might say, "Well, that's interesting. How would you do that?" "Well, we're here at a party, and I'd love to share more with you, but based on your curiosity, why don't I give you a call this week, and we'll discuss it a little more." So now at that point, you've got an opportunity to reconnect with that person, revisit it, and you didn't give away a lot up front so that they're not scared. They don't know what you're going to do or what you're going to say later to them. But you move them from the curiosity stage to a chance to meet them again. And that way you can follow up and build a relationship. So one of the things that's really key, and I didn't really do this years ago, but one of the things that's become really important, it seems like lately in the digital business world, is what's called an audio logo. Some people call it an elevator speech, but it's really someone asks you, what do you do? And you tell them in 30 seconds or less kind of what you do, and it's a way that piques curiosity and piques interest. Check on my time here because we got started late. So let's look at some bad words here, and let's look at some alternative words. And one of the things that I think is really helpful in even coming out of construction background, there's a tendency a lot of times in certain areas, even construction, to use industry-specific jargon. And that's really not helpful a lot of times for your customers because they don't know it. So they don't know the lingo, they don't know the terminology. So yeah, it might make you sound important, but really doesn't help a whole lot in the sales process unless they have some questions that you actually need to define in that area. The first word is a contract. Never use the word contract. Use paperwork or agreement. Next one is sign. Don't ask them to sign anything. Ask them to approve it or okay it. The next one would be price. Don't really use the word price. Use total investment. Or if it's a down payment, use initial investment, or it will cost you in the total investment amount. Next one would be buy. A lot of people have pre-decided not to buy something. So you don't want to ask them to buy something because they've already pre-decided before they go in there. And sometimes the husband and wife already decide, okay, we're not buying nothing. So, you're already dealing with resistance from the very first time you meet the person. If you talk about instead of buying, how about when you own it? Instead of buying, how about talking about them or helping them to get to a point where they can see them owning this? The sixth one would be instead of sell, it would be help them acquire. Meeting, and a meeting is really not so good sometimes. It would be let's get together or have a visit. Let's get together and talk about it. The next one, and we mentioned down payment a moment ago, I think, would be initial investment. Monthly payment would be monthly investment. Instead of deal, how about your opportunity? Instead of saying, hey, this is a great deal, let's reframe that and say, well, it's a great opportunity. Instead of problem, we can reframe that as challenge. Instead of cheaper, and of course in construction we deal with that all the time because you're dealing with price a lot of times and price sensitive negotiations. Instead of cheaper would be more economical. Objections would be areas of concern. Pitch. Now that's not really a word you'd use so much in the sales process, but it's part of that sales jargon, would be presentation or demonstration. And instead of commissions, really it's better probably to present that as a fee or reframe that as a fee for service. And a lot of times when you're young in sales, if you're not taught these things, you just kind of stumble and fumble over your mouth ignorantly because you don't even know. You're trying to do your presentation, you don't even know what you're saying, and not only what you're saying, but what that's doing in the person's mind that's on the other end of hearing that. Most people don't want to be sold anything. They don't want to be manipulated to buy something, and they're already a little uncomfortable in the process because it's new and they don't really know if your product or service is best for them. That's really what a salesperson's job is to help them come to a point of feeling, one, comfortable with your product or service, that it's a good fit for them, and that it's beneficial for them. It's really the best step for them to make forward in what they're looking to do in that particular area, product or service or whatever that's going to add value to their life on some level. Or at least it might even just be a perceived value. But it's helping them become comfortable with seeing the reality of, yes, I can have this. Yes, this is a good decision. Yes, I think this is what I want to do, to getting to the point where yeah, this is what I really want to do. I'm ready to take that step. And so like I said, you're helping them become comfortable and stay comfortable through the selling process with the future benefit of whatever it is that we're offering them. Now I know some of this is probably old hat for some of you, but people do most things based upon emotions, and fear is one of the most powerful emotions there is. So if you're saying things that create fear, then that's obviously creating resistance in their mind. Nervousness creates uneasiness and pressure that they won't like. especially like I said a moment ago, if you're kind of pressured or feeling pressured from a financial standpoint to make a sale, or maybe you got a boss that's kind of pressuring you because your sales have been down and you got to get your sales up for your quarter or whatever. Those pressures sometimes can bleed through and create dis-ease in the presentation with your customer. Emotions are really how we build relationships with other people. Energy and motion, either good or bad. Our word choices make a huge difference in putting some of these, putting people at ease with what we're doing, with our company, our product, or our service. And like we said a moment ago, there are emotional triggers that either move them forward or scare them away. Negative emotional triggers will cause alerts to go off in a person that'll make them want to shut it down and get out of there as soon as possible. I mean, we got in a situation one time, my wife and I, we were in, so they do these travel deals. And so you got to sit in their presentation for, it's not really a timeshare, it's some kind of a deal they're trying to sell, travel program or something. I mean, and it's hard sell. You know how those kinds of deals are with the timeshares. And we just couldn't get out of there. I mean, we were just like, and we couldn't get out of there. And they kept bringing in, and they brought in 3 closers. 3 different guys to try and close us. And we couldn't get out of there. And we just like trapped, and it's like really uncomfortable situation when you're in that. Now, I know that's kind of extreme, but I'm just saying when there gets to a certain level of resistance, customers are just like crawling the walls to get out of the place. We don't want that. We don't want them in that position. One important thing we used to do is have our salespeople role play. And even when you're skilled, sometimes you can get a little bit sloppy in certain things that you say and do in your presentation. So role playing is pretty good, and get comfortable with changes of the language, delivery, different things, so everything is natural and you feel comfortable. And also get comfortable with, come up with a list of 6 or 8 or 10 primary objections that you're going to hear the most, so that you've navigated through that in the role play with what everybody needs to do and feel comfortable in their process and dealing with those. I'm almost done here, just bear with me. One of the things you always want to do, one of the things we always did when you undersell and over-deliver, is you always want to ask for referrals. Referrals are free advertising. And referrals can be huge. I mean, we got lots of projects over the years because of referrals, and we never would have even found those people. It was not, those people weren't looking for our advertising. We wouldn't have known how to reach those people with our advertising. But because of referrals, it opened doors to us that were huge. And when you do get an order, make sure you follow through on everything you promised. Now, if there's even unforeseen things, like in construction, I mean, we'd have weather. You couldn't always know, and they talk about the unpredictability of the weather in Colorado, but in Oklahoma, the weather's pretty unpredictable too. They call it Tornado Alley. Get more tornadoes per square mile than any place in the United States in a year. And it gets pretty unpredictable there. And so, if things come up that are unforeseen, then call that customer immediately and say, you know what, can't do what we said, got a weather issue coming in, we're going to have to either shut down or reschedule or whatever. Maybe you haven't started the job, so you've got to reschedule it to start later, or you're in the middle of the job and you got to shut down and say, hey, you know what, this is the deal. It looks like probably we'll be back Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll keep you posted at this point, but I want to make sure that when we do come back, that your yard is dry. I don't want to trash your yard. I don't want to destroy your yard with ladders and equipment and people and things that we got tromping through your yard. So I want to make sure your yard is dry. I want to make sure everything's ready for us so we don't create a problem for you, and we can give you the quality project that we discussed. What happens a lot of times is when something like that comes up, one of the natural responses I've seen with a lot of people is that they want to just hide. They're like, okay, I don't know what to do. This was unexpected. So they just hide from their customers or ignore them. And you can't, you got to be proactive. The customer, one, will appreciate it and respect it. It's just the right thing to do. And not only makes it look like you're on top of your business with your customer, yeah, they might not want to hear the fact that their project's going to be delayed, but they'd rather hear that in the end run of things, or when it's all said and done, then you end up giving them a substandard product in the process, or something that's deficient or defective because of things that you tried to rush through. So always better to be proactive, because they're going to watch you, and they're going to watch for you to take the lead and handle unforeseen things that come up. And the last one we're going to hit real quick is buyer's remorse and follow-up. One of the things you want to do after you close the sale is follow up within usually the next day or two. Follow up and just touch base with them. Just reaffirm them and continue to add value after the sale. Because they're going to go, after they sign that and then wake up the next day or two, they're going to have that, OMG, what did we do? We just signed a contract and we're stuck. And that's just a natural thing. That's just part of human nature. I mean, most people go through that. So you want to reaffirm with them, you want to reach out to them and add value and continue to affirm that, this is a good decision for them and you're going to deliver on what you said and that it's going to be a good long-term benefit and value for them in the process. Because a lot of times you actually have a 3-day law of right of rescission, so they can back out of a contract in 3 days. One, you don't want that to happen because you don't want to lose the business. You've invested a lot of time and energy to get there. Two, if you really believe this is the best idea for them or the best solution or service product, the best product or service for them, then you just need to reaffirm them a little bit and continue to, I think of it kind of like this, you got a little bit of a wound that kind of hit from that contract makes a little bit of a wound. So sometimes you got to kind of just rub that a little bit, soften it up, love on it just a little bit, so that your customer feels confident still that they made a good decision later. And then once you start to get to the point of fulfillment, then that's all going to go away anyway if you're going to over-deliver on what you've sold them. So they're going to see the value they're going to see the value that you contracted with them initially, but you just want to make sure you don't lose them in that remorse process, because the wheels kind of come off in their mind and their psyche of what they just did and how much is this going to cost us, and I got 3 days. Do I need to get out of this? Okay, how do I get out of this? You just don't want that thing to unravel on you. So that's really all I had today. If anybody wants any notes that I had from today, and I've got another list of things that we didn't get into, of things that probably shouldn't say in the sales process, as well as things you should say instead, I'll be happy to email those things to you if you'd like. Just put a note there on the back next to your name that says something like email notes, and I'll be happy to email those to you. And these are things that, like I said, I learned from Tom Hopkins that were really helpful to me over the years, and God blessed us to make a lot of money as a result of those things. So any of Tom's books, in fact, I have a copy of his book there that he gave me a number of years ago that's autographed, but I can get it out for you if you want to see it. But it's called Low Profile Selling. Excellent book. He's also written another one on mastering of sales and different things, but Low Profile Selling talks about a lot of the things that we just covered, and a lot of the points that we covered, of course, in much greater detail. And he gets into closing sequences and lots of deeper elements in there. I mean, we didn't even hit a snippet of it today, hardly. But I'm just saying it's an excellent book, and he's a great resource for sales techniques. So any questions, any thoughts, any comments?
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate that. And I know in the beginning of your talk you said something along the lines of, you've probably heard this before, you're not bored and everything, but a lot of these things that you've said, I know and I teach and I've implemented, but sometimes I just need to hear it again. And how often is it that we're in a presentation, right, not a pitch, or sometimes I spiel, but in a presentation, and we're going through it, it's kind of going through the motions, and we forget something, right? It's that one thing costs us the deal. And so Tom Hopkins is one of my favorites, and he's the master of tie downs. So I was with corporate, in the corporate world, it was all about Tom Hopkins tie downs as a very, very simple thing. It's a wonderful day, isn't it? We're all sitting here, aren't we? And just these affirmation, these reciprocal affirmations that are small, and they just eventually get larger and larger. And then when you ask for $25,000, you've trained them to say yes. And Tom Hopkins, of course, says 12 to 14 times by the time they say yes. You've trained them within that hour period or half hour period. And so, I have one of the companies I have is a design and sales firm, and I'm talking with somebody in one of my organizations, and he's having a hard time making the sales. And you see that I'm trying everything you've said, and I've got to run leads with him, and I've presented where he ran leads, where I ran the lead and presented, and he watched, and we switched. Doing this for months. And of course, if he's not making sales, he's not making money.
Right.
And he didn't like the not making money part.
I understand that.
If it works for me and he's not making money, guess who else isn't making money?
Right.
And so I said, I want you to try something. I said, I just have a guess, knowing your character, that when you're handing the iPad over with the price of the project or the investment of the project, you're talking. And you're throwing out the 5% military discount, and you're backpedaling, and well, we can get rid of this if it's too much, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, how did you know? And I said, because I know you. I said, because you spend so much time in the rapport process and the warm-up that you become their best friend, and now you're afraid of not becoming their friend anymore.
Right.
But there's such a thing as spending too long in the warm-up. And I said, so I want you to hand the iPad over, and I want you to just shut up.
Yep.
And he said, well, for how long? And I said, oh, it's going to feel like forever, but it'll probably be 2 minutes.
Next one that talks loses.
And
That's what Tom teaches.
And
Yeah.
that's exactly what I told him. And I said the first one who talks loses. And then he goes, okay, I'll try it. So the average sale with this company is $4,000. So I said, now call me after you're, when you're in the car driving away, give you a call. So he does. And he goes, you'll never guess what happened. And I said, I could probably guess. And I said, you handed them the iPad? And he said, yes. And that's one thing I always taught him, as I said, you put it in their hands, and then I said, then you adjust your body. And so I said, you don't fold your hands, because now you're expecting them to buy.
Right.
You don't put your hands in. I said, you don't. You can cross your hands. You can put your hands in your pocket. I said, I want you to visually disarm yourself. You're not going to give them a price and then look mean. And I said, what I do is I put my hands in my pocket, and I lean against the counter, and I look around the kitchen. I don't stare at them because they're doing this in their mind. They've already purchased emotionally. They're now justifying their purchase logically in that moment. I'm going to allow them that time to justify the purchase. So he did that. He gave him the iPad. He shut up. He went. He said he folded his hands. He kind of looked around and leaned up against the countertop in their kitchen and just didn't say anything. And I said, how long was it? He goes, it felt like 6 hours. He said it was probably 6 seconds.
Yep.
And he said, I said, what happened next? She looked at me and she said, okay. And I said, great. So you made a sale. How does that feel? Good. He goes, no. He goes, Michael, it was almost $12,000. It was 3 times the average sale.
Wow.
I thought I had no chance at all. And I said, that's the power of shutting up.
Yep.
And so he's done that from now on. He's made some of the largest sales the company has seen.
Wow.
He's making an average of a sale a day, making me money every single day just because of that one little thing. And so, but how often, could that one little thing be between us and that next big break? But we don't think about it. And that's when I was with Home Depot as a kitchen designer, and our region, the biggest sale was $66,000. And when I closed one for $126,000, breaking regional records all over Home Depot, they still haven't beat them. I call and check every couple of years just for fun. And they say, how did you do it? I said, it's really simple. Watch this. And these are some of the top salespeople in the nation that work for corporate Home Depot doing this. And they're like waiting. What is it? I said, shh. And I said, it's that.
Quiet.
And I said, I showed them the price, and I shut up. And they were like, what? That's how you make $10,000 commissions? And I go, uh-huh. And they're like, what the heck? And then they're upset at me because it's so stupid, it's so simple. And anyways, and that's why I'm formulating this Jewish secrets to business that we've been doing for 4,000 years, and I'm at probably 1,600 words right now. And I was reminded of some things just now, and so I'm just making a ton of notes, and it's all just these little things. So I appreciate you going over these rudimentary things because I forget them sometimes too.
It's natural.
I get arrogant, I get cocky, and they're going to buy, blah, 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 and then they don't, and I go, what the heck, what was it? And I go back, and it was just one simple thing. My warm-up wasn't long enough. I didn't answer their questions. I didn't have enough tie-downs. I had on the price and started backtracking and talking because I was uncomfortable. So.
Well, Vince Lombardi years ago was, maybe not everybody in the room knows who Vince Lombardi was, but he was coach for the Green Bay Packers World Championship team for a number of years in the early 60s. And These guys were world champions. And this was before the Super Bowl, the very beginning of Super Bowl years. But at the beginning of camp every year, he'd hold up a football and he'd say, this is a football. We're going back to the basics. You know, and that's exactly it. We got to go back and revisit those things, or we naturally get sloppy in the process. But I just felt I wanted to share those things today, and we covered them kind of quick because we started late.